Scared Potter.
You wish.
Hello and welcome to Hogwarts Hangout.
This time we asked you, the fans, what you wanted us to talk about.
And you wanted us to talk about Draco Malfoy. Did Draco Malfoy deserve redemption? We're obviously going to be talking Draco, so fair warning, there will be spoilers in this episode, so if you haven't caught up with all the stories just yet, now's your time to turn back. I'm Reece, and like Draco Malfoy, I love a good green apple.
And I'm Annie, and like Hermione Granger, I love it when Draco Malfoy is punched in the face.
Let's take ourselves right back to that very first meeting with Draco, when we first met him in Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. What were your first impressions?
I just think he came across very uppity.
Absolutely.
Him and his mum were there, like Narcissa was looking down her nose at everybody, and then he gets talking to Harry and immediately his tone's off and he calls Hagrid a savage.
Oh yeah, I did forget about that bit.
Yeah.
This is who I think I would be anyway. This is me being very honest.
Yeah.
At that age, I think I wanted to be Draco though. Seeing him on screen, I remember however old I was when Philosopher's Stone came out, I was obsessed with that opening monologue of Draco's. When you first meet him, it's like, I'm Malfoy, Draco Malfoy. I used to do the whole thing. It's such a fun villain, I guess.
Yeah.
But a fun one, a charismatic one, and I think that's why people are quick to forgive Draco.
Got that.
No?
No, not from book Draco. No, I never ever. Like,
I guess not from book Draco. We
like,
should clarify this, I think, actually, before we go too far into this discussion. How much does Tom Felton and how cool he is complicate this argument when we're talking about Draco Malfoy?
Book Malfoy is, to me, just an uppity snob. And,
Yeah.
I don't like him. I never warmed to him. Like, he just reminded me of too many of the type of people that you go to school with that you just want to avoid at all costs. But film Malfoy, and it's all thanks to Tom Felton, he's got that almost extra layer of charm and charisma that he brings to Malfoy that gives him less of a... He's still a bully, but more of that bad boy, fun edge.
That's exactly it.
And I think it's a lot to do with who Tom Felton is as a person. He just seems to have that kind of golden retriever energy, which is he's so nice and happy cool all the time. And then he had to play a character who not so much, and he managed to kind of make this Draco Malfoy that everybody seems to adore.
Yeah, see, I got it even in the books. It's just the way he speaks with that drawl that's always described, and that confidence and that sneer and how slow and confident he is. I just think it's that classic, it's like the mean girl stereotype. You love to hate them. You aspire to be them. You want them to like you. I know that they're not good fundamentally, but they're just still so charismatic. Okay, I feel like we should address the Gryffindor lion in the room. We are two proud Gryffindors tackling this conversation, though we've done well dressing up as Slytherin today.
Yeah, we're like the two most Slytherin-looking Gryffindors out there.
But so how much does that house dynamic, because we should touch on that, complicate this argument as well? Like, when we're questioning Draco and his motives and his villainy, if you want to use that word, how much of that is just preordained in this Hogwarts tradition of dividing the students in the way that they do? Like, was he ever gonna be able to be anything but have that animosity towards Harry as a Slytherin towards a Gryffindor?
Obviously, there are a lot of occasions which we don't necessarily see in Harry's year or at Hogwarts, where you see people from different houses kind of working together. I always like to come back to like Slughorn, for example.
Yeah.
He's always kind of willing to work with people of all houses. He's willing to champion the students that he thinks are special, no matter what house they're from. I mean, Lily Potter was one of his Lily Evans back then was one of his favourite students, and she was a Gryffindor. There is obviously that kind of divide between the houses, and I do think Gryffindor and Slytherin have probably the strongest rivalry out of all the houses, the ones that get on the least. But I don't think it has to be that way.
Draco, because of that Slytherin connection, he came to school with ready-made friends.
Yeah, he did. He actually, it was kind of to do with the circles that he ran in, because obviously his parents were his dad was a Death Eater, and they all ran in those kind of pure blood circles. And so when he started Hogwarts, he was already friends with Theodore Nott and Vincent Crabbe. And funnily enough, and this actually speaks to Draco's cunning, I think.
Yeah.
When he got onto the Hogwarts Express, he immediately recruited Goyle because he was physically imposing and Malfoy wasn't. So suddenly, it wasn't Crabbe and Nott, it was Crabbe and Goyle, these two henchmen, like flanking Malfoy. And that just makes me think about the fact, does Malfoy choose friends that can serve a purpose? Maybe
it's quite sad.
It is quite sad. He might call them friends, but they're not real friendships.
No.
They're surface level. And maybe that also factors into a bit into his horrible outer shell.
They remember the fact that Draco did extend the hand of friendship to Harry on that Hogwarts Express initial journey. That was in the pursuit of an ally. There's this theory that Harry, a baby that he was able to take down Voldemort, the darkest wizard of all time. It was a popular theory among Death Eaters and Dark Wizards, and Lucius Malfoy really believed in this, that Harry himself must be a Dark Wizard.
Yeah.
And Draco, obviously, as soon as he found out that Harry was who he was on the train, he marched straight up to him and tried to, again, not make a friendship, make an ally.
When Harry rebuffed him and he saw that Harry was sitting with, you know, Ron Weasley, who Draco would have considered a blood traitor, and that he was just not interested in that, he probably quickly realised that Harry was not the dark wizard that he'd been brought up to believe he was. And that disappointment probably added to the animosity he felt towards Harry.
It probably also humbled him immediately.
Yeah, exactly.
He'd recruited Goyle successfully. He went and he was immediately humbled. That's a villain origin story, right?
Exactly. Embarrassment, disappointment, and being an uppity 11-year-old.
We can't talk about Draco without talking about that family baggage.
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't help that his name literally means bad faith.
Yes, it's like old French, like Malfoy, bad faith.
Bad faith.
It's there in the name.
No, yeah, it's there in the name. Did he ever actually really have a chance to begin with a name like that? That's what shaped his worldview. It's what shaped the formative years of his life, being brought up in this bubble that purebloods are superior, therefore you are superior, you are special. And then he was in for a bit of a nasty shock.
Yeah.
When he was released into the wider Wizarding world.
He was indoctrinated, essentially.
Yes.
Like that was a very sheltered life. Those beliefs became his beliefs. How much is he to blame for that?
I think he needs to take some responsibility for his actions.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that you can look at his parents as the ones that instilled this point of view. But then also in them as well, they had it instilled by their parents and their parents. And so it's...
And the wider Wizarding world.
Exactly.
It's not just the Malfoys that shared these beliefs about the Wizarding world and who should have power.
No, that's very true. It's not as if... Yes, Malfoy was in rather a bubble in terms of his parents were, and his dad especially, had been in Voldemort's inner circle as a Death Eater, and he had seen and participated in, presumably, a lot of horrible things and been spouting all of this rubbish. But that view was actually quite common in the wider Wizarding world too. So his views were kind of supported at home. Well, he learned them at home, like you said, he was indoctrinated. And then when he went out and saw the rest of the Wizarding world, it was quite a lot of the time his views were probably reinforced and backed up. So he probably thought that he was thinking the right things.
Yeah, I mean, he's just parroting what's happened in his family, and that goes back generations and generations. You know, I was talking about this Draco trait of, you know, he not finding friends but looking for allies. That's right back into the Malfoy family history. I mean, there's writing on this again on harrypotter.com about the Malfoy family and how far back this tendency to make strategic partnerships goes. There's a Malfoy ancestor who, it was a rumor that he tried to marry Elizabeth first and make that, you know, they weren't worried about muggles when money was involved or when status was involved. They were happy to be with muggles, and to forge a connection like that, that's echoed throughout generations. That's exactly what Draco's doing when he's trying to make the right friends. Yeah,
and what's really interesting there as well is the fact that they were willing to interact with muggles back then.
Yeah.
But then I think, like a lot of the Wizarding world, when the statute of secrecy came into play, that's when it all got quite a lot more closed off, and probably these real anti-muggle, anti-muggle-born views had the opportunity to take hold. Because there are other people in the wizarding world who have had like a similar upbringing to Malfoy who didn't do the same as him. Just look at Sirius Black.
Yeah.
He was brought up in a family who was, you know, arguably even more fanatic than the Malfoys.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Malfoys didn't cut
yeah,
heads of house elves off.
Exactly, all of that. And, you know, Sirius's mother, we only met her in the portrait, but
yeah.
But the point is that Sirius, age 11,
yeah,
started to rebel against his family's views. Even then, when he was a child, he was able to be, this is wrong, I don't agree with this. And he sought his own path and he made his own friendships and he ended up doing a lot of good in the wizarding world.
Yeah.
And Malfoy, you know,
he just lent into it. Sirius didn't have that love in the family, whereas Malfoy comes from this very loving family. Like whatever we'll say about Narcissa and Lucius, they loved him, they doted upon him. Draco was an only child.
Yeah.
I think that makes a big difference as well. So it's going to be a bit easier for Draco to end up becoming his parents than it was for Sirius. If I'm questioning the villainy of Draco Malfoy, I can't deny that the pranks, at least as we're getting into second, third year, things like that, they're funny. Like, come on, I would find that funny if I was in Hogwarts. Like stuff like pretending to be a Dementor because Harry was scared of them to throw him off his game during Quidditch. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, but then I also come from the point of view that a prank or a joke is only funny if both people are laughing.
Okay, Hermione.
Do you know what I mean? Like Harry with the Dementors, that was like one of Harry's true fears. And Draco was like, I'm going to use this against you. And I feel like if they had friendship and it was almost like done with, as banter with your friends and you have that understanding, then I could maybe consider it funny. But the fact that he was doing it
preying on this deep fear.
Deep fear of Harry's, yeah, he was preying upon it, and he just knew that it would cause Harry to be distracted whilst playing Quidditch as well, which obviously was probably another goal of his.
Well, yeah, it's all fueled by this rivalry with Harry, and again, to play devil's advocate, even though that's all I've done in this discussion, to side with Draco again, if I'm putting myself in his shoes, especially when it comes to Quidditch games and stuff like that, it must be so infuriating to have someone like Harry around. Like, how annoying. Part of me would want to play pranks on them.
Training for the ballet, Potter!
When Draco did start Hogwarts, he was, well, we know that he'd been brought up to believe that he was superior anyway, but the one thing that he thought that he was going to outshine, like his first years at, was Quidditch.
Yes.
Yeah, and he came all fully prepared to be the Quidditch star. And then obviously first years don't really get to play it.
That's
in
the
normal
rule.
Yeah,
first
years
cannot
don't
bring
play.
a broom and you cannot be on the house team, and then comes along the boy who lived.
And then Harry comes along and he's just immediately naturally talented, doesn't even need to practice, whereas Draco has probably put in some work and does have some natural talent. But Harry just kind of comes in, blows him out of the water, and it's like...
Would that not make you snap? Is that not a villain origin story enough?
I can understand it. We've got to remember that for every kind of, you know, dressing up as Dementor and things which in the right context could be seen as like a harmless prank, he was also using slurs like mudblood against Hermione.
No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood.
That, in my opinion, is, well, it is beyond the pale.
Unforgivable.
It's unforgivable. But he never once apologised for any of his actions.
No.
And in a way, I feel like, to me, especially in those early years, Draco could have had redeeming features. But things like having Buckbeak sentenced to be executed, calling Hermione a mudblood, all of those kind of things, which he never once took responsibility or ownership for.
It's all about the stakes, I guess. When we're talking about the stakes of a Quidditch game,
Yeah.
or even the Triwizard Tournament, or, you know, that kind of rivalry, perhaps we could say things are forgivable. But when we're talking about the Chamber of Secrets being opened, about Muggleborns dying, or as they get older, and, you know, we're getting into the later Hogwarts years, the stakes are that much higher, and therefore his actions a lot more unforgivable.
Exactly, and I think with Draco, there's a lot of his you can see where a lot of his motivations come from. A lot of it is jealousy, a lot of it is envy, and all of those horrible things. A lot of it is trying to appear to be the superior person, and it's just about the actions that he takes and looking at them in context. Fred and George pulling pranks, that's fun. Malfoy doing it, to me, that's bullying.
We are not just playing schoolboy rivals anymore, we are playing Voldemort is back.
Yeah.
It's now 6th year, everything's out in the open, and Draco Malfoy is officially a Death Eater.
Yeah.
Is he now, is this the point of, past the point of no return?
I think at this point, what's really interesting is that Draco is a player in terms of the fact that he has become a Death Eater, and he has been given a task by Voldemort.
Yeah.
But again, he's still not getting the respect that he probably thinks that he's owed,
Yeah.
which I think is really interesting because Voldemort set him up to fail. Like, he never thought that he could kill Dumbledore.
Yeah.
Like, he set him up to fail that task. And then he's got this big important mission. You know, he's not a member of the Slug Club in 6th year. He's not.
And that's, well, more importantly, that still bothers him.
Yeah, and it still bothers him as well.
Yeah. Now that he is a Death Eater, he's won. He's like, you know, they're on the same level.
Yeah.
He's part of this bigger thing that he's been so desperate to be a part of. Does he know? Do we think he understands that Voldemort has set him up to fail, or is he just loving this role?
I think the thing also, actually, a bit of context for his 6th year is the fact that he's now in a position where his dad has been put into Azkaban.
Yeah.
So he's having to do this for his family in a way.
Such pressure.
So there's a lot of pressure. So I'm not sure whether he thinks Voldemort has set him up to fail necessarily, but I feel like he's aware.
This is punishment.
This is
almost.
punishment.
Yeah, you're so right. I don't think we can talk about this. And again, this might be another glimmer of light, you know, a chance for redemption for Draco. We can't talk about him becoming a Death Eater without talking about Lucius's fall from grace, because it's not just Draco hot-headedly, I want to be a Death Eater, I want to kill Dumbledore, I want to be evil. It is, oh gosh, I have to redeem my father, I have to not be killed myself. Like, it's not as simple as we're making it out, perhaps.
No, exactly. And I think as well, at this stage as well, I kind of like to think about how much Malfoy was motivated by belief in, like, did he truly believe in Voldemort's vision for the wizarding world?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I'm not sure either, because I think there are a lot of factors that come into play. I think Malfoy obviously was raised to believe that he was superior because he was a pureblood, but I think he bought into the idea of being superior, and then he liked that more than necessarily the idea of why. But at this particular stage, I also think he was really motivated by fear.
Absolutely.
I think he was doing what he felt he had to do to keep his family together. He wasn't necessarily believing fully what Voldemort was saying. And it was just a mess of factors, which then culminated in him being tasked with killing Dumbledore.
Yeah, which is that so bad? Like, Harry is obviously this example of pure bravery and standing for what is right. But here we have, 16, 17-year-old boy. And of course it's fear that's driving him through that whole year. It's kind of evidenced in those reckless attempts that...
Yeah.
You know, the poison mead and the cursed necklace. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's absolutely just a scared little boy still.
The thing is, and on that, because actually that's really interesting that you've brought up the mead and the necklace and everything, because I think that, yes, in some ways it's not as bad because he's not motivated by this horrible desire. Evilness,
yeah.
Exactly. But he is willing to risk and nearly kill innocent people in his pursuit of his target of Dumbledore. So there's almost that kind of, he has to do it for his family, all of this, but his ruthlessness in it almost, and his lack of care for the collateral damage is also incredibly worrying.
I mean, it is. It's huge. Like, what if he succeeded? What
Yeah.
if, I mean, not succeeded, but what if Katie died?
Yeah.
And
Or
Ron and or Slughorn died? Would that have changed things? Would that have stopped him sooner? I'd like to think yes, maybe, because I think what he's realising now is things are getting real. You know, we have this pre-Voldemort coming back and this post-Voldemort coming back Draco. The stakes are higher now. He understands things are real, but he's still showing this recklessness. He's still showing this immaturity. He doesn't get into the slug club. He still wants to one-up people. At this point, like, murder is involved. Like, you know, it's getting a bit inexcusable. But then we have all these moments during the 6th year of, you know, crying to moaning Myrtle.
Yeah.
And these kind of tender Draco moments that we get for the first time that just shows he's just incredibly burdened.
All of these things can be true about how he feels, but he still took those steps which endangered like innocent students and men.
But did he take that final step? Would he have gone through with killing Dumbledore? That's the big question. Obviously, Dumbledore had set it up in a way that he never even had to get close. Snape was always going to step in and save, you know, Draco's purity, you know, his soul from not being a killer. That was Snape's job. So I guess we don't know, but he was lowering his wand. We can't deny that.
For me, it's not even necessarily about the fact would he have killed Dumbledore at that point. It's the way that he got to that point.
Yeah.
Which, did he go so far that at that point he was irredeemable?
As we get more into the 7th story, you know, we have this moment in Malfoy Manor, which I can't not think about when we are answering this question of whether Draco deserves redemption or whether he ever gets redemption. And it's the moment where he's asked to identify Harry, Ron and Hermione and just confirm that. He doesn't exactly say, no, it's definitely not them.
If Voldemort had came at that moment to Malfoy Manor, they would be, and he had got it wrong, they'd be dead.
Yeah, again, motivated by fear. I also think there's a bit of, and I don't think this does mean that he deserves redemption necessarily, but at this point, I just don't think he cares. Life is so hard at this point. You know, we've spoken about this fall from grace from Lucius. He's back now. He's at Malfoy Manor. Malfoy Manor is being used as this kind of headquarters, and the family is disgraced. I just don't think he cares about the vision anymore, about Voldemort's kind of goal.
In the Battle of Hogwarts, he tried to attack Harry in the room of requirement, in the room of hidden things. Yeah. So does that...
He flip-flops. It's so, you can't, he's just not consistent. I don't know.
Which does speak to your point that he's not fully committed to the cause, if he can flip-flop like that.
What if he caught Harry? Would he have been able to actually hand him over?
We know that Draco, there's a bit of a question mark about Draco, but Crabbe, obviously, was willing to kill and he died. And I wonder if that also shocked Draco into realising just quite the stakes that they were dealing with, just how high they actually were.
It's not first year Crabbe and Goyle anymore,
it's not,
you know, it's not a punch or a jewel in the trophy room.
No, it's life or
and death.
I think a lot of what was motivating him was his family, which is then reflected in the fact that when Voldemort, you know, did use the killing curse on Harry that second time and asked Narcissa to check, people suggest that it was again a crisis of conscience, that she told him that he was dead even though he was alive. But actually, was she also just doing what she could to protect her family?
But does it just show that they never had faith in Voldemort? I don't think their motivations are ever anything but self-serving. And in that moment in time, all she cared about was Draco. I don't think she cared about saving Harry. That I firmly believe in. It was just a quicker, more convenient way to check on the safety of her son. Exactly.
And I think when you touched upon the idea of what was kind of motivating them overall, and I think power, like you said, position in society, and then as they got further in and almost seemed to get in over their heads, it became all about their family and protecting their family. But I still wonder whether that actually makes them worse than if they really did truly follow Voldemort, because they're willing to do and say horrible things for a cause that they didn't necessarily fully commit to. Is that worse?
It's bad. It's not, I don't know if it's evil. Again, it's this very ambitious, kind of cutthroat, business-like need to be on top. And do anything that it takes to do that, which again is bad. I still think, I want to go back to your point about being motivated by family though. I still think that is the core. I still think you have this little family, there's the three of them, and they are still motivated by love for each other. You know, you have the opposite of Narcissa in Bellatrix when she says, I'd happily give my sons to the service of the Dark Lord.
Yeah.
That's not Narcissa, and it's not even Lucius. And therefore Draco is also not that pure Bellatrix, like blindly following, blindly believing in the cause. It doesn't make them good people, I don't think at all. But it doesn't make them as evil as Voldemort and Bellatrix either.
No, I mean, I think for me it's that kind of idea of, obviously, you know, you love your family and you do value them highly, but should you be putting them above people and what is right in general? Because I don't know whether then that does tip into evil, if you're willing to do horrendous things just to protect those that you care about.
It's that whole, what is it, that philosophical conundrum of, do you save one person that you love or 1,000 innocent people or something like that? I guess I can relate to just picking your family and just wanting to, at that point of the Battle of Hogwarts, just find your family and get out of there and not worry about the outcome. I can relate to that. No,
definitely. And I do think it also, if we were looking at this from a house perspective, that idea of maybe looking out for your family or looking out for the masses, maybe. I feel like if you were to ask Harry, that would be his Gryffindor trait would be protect everyone.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Whereas the Slytherin, it's the ultimate Slytherin trait in the Battle of Hogwarts. Like, let's not forget that Slughorn did fight.
Yeah, he did.
He just went and got reinforcements first.
Exactly.
Is that so bad?
Well, yeah, it's that self-preservation above all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there other characters that deserve redemption? Is this something we should be offering at all? Is it all just there on the page?
Yeah, actually, it's a point that one of the comments, when we asked people what they would like us to talk about, they brought up. They said that actually, why are we focusing on Draco when there's Dudley Dursley?
Yeah.
And that actually really did make me think that Dudley Dursley, I feel, had his redemption arc a little bit.
A bit. There was a touch of it.
Yeah, I'd like to explore it a bit more, but I do feel like Harry saved him from the Dementors in Order of the Phoenix.
Yeah.
And then after that, they didn't really have that much contact. And then, but that moment changed Dudley to realise that Harry wasn't all bad. There was that cold cup of tea outside Harry's room, which I just thought was really sweet, and it was a gesture of Dudley trying to you know, bridge that gap.
And then there was that confusion that Harry wasn't going with
them. Yeah, and the fact that he said that he doesn't think he's a waste of space.
Yeah.
And again, it's not...
it's not the nicest thing.
Not the nicest thing to say. And again, it doesn't excuse all the bullying.
It doesn't.
But it's a nice moment where you see him pulling away from the ideas that his parents have filled his head with.
Yeah, let's not forget that is where it comes from. It's a very parallel story. We've got another only child, except obviously Harry was in this household, which does complicate it, who has been kind of had these put on a pedestal and has all these bad ideologies drummed into them by two parents who fervently believe in them. It's the same story.
Exactly. And unlike Draco, who always seemed to put his parents above all else a lot, because we talked a lot about how a lot of it was to do with him wanting him and his family staying together and all of that. Dudley seems to start to question it a bit and actually start thinking for himself, which is a bit of a shock.
Yeah, he does stand up to them in a way.
In a way. And, you know, it's not much, but it's like this little glimmer of hope that he can change.
It's that he could be on the road to redemption.
Yeah.
Whether he's done it, whether he has redeemed himself, I'm not so sure. But does he deserve it, and does he show this that he is able to be redeemed in that moment? I think so. Yeah.
And what I like as well, I know J.K. Rowling's mentioned it, is that in the future him and Harry do have managed to maintain some kind of relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they're never going to be the closest, but it's nice that they've managed to... They've almost both survived a household for different reasons. Obviously, Harry was like very much neglected and treated poorly. And Dudley, in a way, was also suffered some kind of abuse in a way because he was so coddled and so put on this pedestal and so just filled with rotten ideas.
Yeah.
That the fact that they've gone through this upbringing and that they've still managed to find common ground or a space for one another and move forward, it's just a nice little moment
It is
of redemption.
nice, and I'm so glad we got it in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're pretty sure on Dudley.
Yeah.
Are there any other characters you think either need redemption or just don't deserve it at all? I mean, I know Snape's a big one.
Snape's always a big one, yeah.
I think we get this moment of understanding with the Prince's Tale and understanding his motivations, whether it excuses a lot of his behaviour as an adult towards a child, just being as mean as he was.
But then you go back to that takes us back to the Marauders, doesn't it, as well? That, like, where did Snape's behaviour come from? And,
I guess, but he carries it so much further into adulthood. This is, again, we've so far been talking about teenagers.
Yeah.
Snape's an adult, which also always makes me think of Dumbledore.
Yes, and Dumbledore's one that definitely had redemption. Well, he got a second chance in the wizarding world because, well, when he just left Hogwarts and he was
so only 18 years old.
Only 18, yeah, and he was still buying into he and Grindelwald, one of a dark wizard to rival Voldemort.
Yeah.
You know, he was fully enamoured with Grindelwald's worldview, and they were working together to create this vision for the
this
wizarding
anti-Muggle world. This is where I find it harder to offer Dumbledore redemption than I ever will Draco, because Draco, I think we've spent this whole discussion kind of saying that Draco was never a leader. He liked to gather followers and he liked to have these kind of strategic relationships, but he was never, and Lucius was never leading the charge. They were kind of just aligning themselves with powerful people who were leading the charge, whereas Dumbledore was that powerful person. He was that powerful, dangerous person with the dangerous ideologies.
And the thing with Dumbledore as well, that I always find interesting, is that it took someone close to him being hurt for him to snap out of this. Whether he would have come to that decision without...
With the deaths of innocents.
Yeah, is something I guess we'll never know.
No.
But and then I guess when he was redeemed and he did get that second chance, he then did use the rest of his life to, you know, fight for good.
Yeah.
And try and ensure that Voldemort stayed out of power, and you know he did work for the greater good, I guess. Well, which was actually their slogan, but the other greater good, the true greater good. But I do think maybe it goes back to what we were talking about before, about it being easier to forgive certain people because of what house they come from, or, you know, what they did in the future. And I think that's also what we need to consider as well, is you have to make up for your actions that you took in the past.
Yeah.
And did someone like Snape, or did someone like Draco, or did the Marauders, or did Dudley, did they all do that?
Well, there you have it. Was Draco Malfoy a foul, loathsome, evil little cockroach, or was he just simply misunderstood?
Remember, you can join in the conversation across our social channels on Facebook, TikTok and Instagram. We would really love to hear from you, or just drop a comment below.
And for more Harry Potter news as fast as our hours can deliver it, visit us on harrypotter.com, where you can sign up, find out your Hogwarts house, or simply just geek out with us on your favourite Harry Potter moments.
We'll see you again next time, or else my father will hear about this.